future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre Lindh.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Solutions, the leading iGaming PAM platform with a modular approach, including many benefits like a fast, secure, and scalable API-based platform, integrated with all major third-party products and services. Make sure you head over to Pragmatic Solutions and join our smart thinking.
And good afternoon, Tom. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very good, Pierre. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. And, I was doing my research here before this podcast and quickly came to realize that I'm doing a podcast today with the best dressed person in the entire gaming industry. And so, I couldn't be worse off myself. And obviously, to level with you today, I've been dressing up in a suit today. So as a first question here, Tom, could you rate my suit, perhaps, my efforts today on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think you look sharp.
All right.
Yeah, look good.
Good. So, Tom, what's the importance of coming across dressing and keeping this image of a suit at all times? Like, what do you think that makes types of difference for you?
It's funny, when I was a kid, I used to go to my best mate's house and sit there and watch movies with him and his brothers. And his mum, I would always dress in my dad's clothes. So I'd have like a nice pair of slacks on and like suit pants and a shirt my dad gave me and some nice jumper. And the mum would go like, "Oh, why don't you dress more like your friend Tom?" to my best mate. And he's like, "Mum, he's a weirdo. Like, he's 12 and dressing up in a suit. What are you talking about?" And I don't know why I've always dressed quite formally. Maybe it's just because I saw my dad dressing that way and I had a lot of hand-me-downs. And then as I got older, my dad, as a present for birthdays, will always buy me shirts and suits and shoes. And so, I don't know. I've just always sort of kept to that. And when you get used to dressing in a certain style, it's sort of and I think also dressing in a suit allows you to go in many different. You can be you can go to basically anywhere. If you've got a dark suit, you can travel with it. You can go to a business meeting. If you have to go out, you can go out. It sort of fits for many occasions, and especially when you're traveling to places like London, which require a suit for a lot of the places that you go. But I don't know. I just got used to it, and I've sort of always worn a suit. Now with kids, I don't wear a suit as much as I used to. But I used to wear a suit basically every day. People used to laugh at me when I was at university, going to uni in a suit, but anyway.
I love that. I'm a big fan of How I Met Your Mother series that was in the early 2010s, and one of the main characters, Barney Stinson, was famous for also wearing a suit, and he would also sleep in a suit. I don't know if that's the case with you as well, Tom.
Well, definitely not. Definitely not now with kids and married, but yeah, it's funny. Men have it very easy in comparison. I travel and just take some, I don't know, toiletry gear and socks and change of underwear or whatever, and you just can have the same dark suit. It's so easy being a
I like it.
Well-tailored dark suit makes life pretty easy.
I like it. It goes with anything. So Tom, I mean, you come from a long line in your family, a background of bookmakers, and you obviously early on became the biggest bookmaker in Australia yourself. But can you talk a little bit more about kind of your family heritage? And then obviously you were born, you were here now, and what happened in between?
Yeah, okay. So look, my great-grandfather was a bookie in the 1800s. My grandfather was the biggest bookie in the world in the 60s. So he would be betting to win or lose £1 million, and you could buy a house in a nice suburb in Sydney for £3,000. So it was just huge betting in the 60s. And then my dad was a big bookie and also a professional betting syndicate, betting all around the world. And my mum is a horse trainer, and her father was Australia's most successful Group 1 winning horse trainer. So long heritage on both sides in the industry. And I grew up not liking horse racing at all, or had any sort of knowledge about betting. My future, I thought, was in the finance industry. And so I was doing commerce at Sydney University and majoring in finance. And I literally went out one day to the races. My dad said, "Do you want to come out and work on a Saturday?" And I just fell in love with it. There was so much action and big betting and theatre. And I just said to my dad, "Look, can I work whenever you need someone? I'd love to work with you." And I sort of changed my university timetable around and worked at the races as much as I could. And then my grandfather came out of retirement to teach me how to be a bookie. And I basically had the blueprint of how my dad and my grandfather had operated. And I just fell in love with it. And basically that became my passion.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, now obviously you're raising children yourself. Is this important to you that the legacy within the family continues?
In terms of with my kids?
Yeah, exactly. So,
look, I think from going to being an on-course bookmaker to running online betting business, being tomwaterhouse.com, then to running William Hill, Australia's business, to now running a VC company, it isn't necessarily going into betting or to being a bookie, but I think I'd love, if they loved it, obviously it's up to the kids, but being in business, business is such a fun game to play. And I'm very passionate. I love working, and I love just being part of businesses and being in business. Hopefully they're passionate about that as well. But if they're not, well, it's their life. But I definitely talk about business a lot, and I get them to come into the office, and because I love talking about business, I basically make that the conversation often.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's really up to, as long as they're happy and like what they're doing, then whatever.
Amazing. And I would like to talk a little bit about kind of the brand itself, Tom Waterhouse, because in the businesses that you've created throughout the years, the personal brand has seemingly always followed you, so to say. You have tomwaterhouse.com, Tom Waterhouse VC, obviously. I think there's Tom's Picks, or Waterhouse Picks or something like that.com as well. Can you talk a little bit more about just the choice of using your own personal brand at the core of the businesses that you've created?
Yeah, look, so I thought that my life would be being an on-course bookmaker. So I worked with my grandfather, and we went from starting out in sort of 2002, 2003 to being biggest bookmaking operation in Australia by 2008. And I moved down to Melbourne, and I thought, gosh, how good is life being a bookie? I work a few days, maybe 4 days each week. I was living at Crown Casino for 4 years, and I thought every day is like every 10 minutes I've got it's like you're playing high stakes poker. And it was just so much fun, turning over hundreds of millions of dollars and betting punters to win millions of dollars each day. And I just thought, this is the best. But what happened is that the advertising restrictions opened up in Australia. The iPhone came out, and 3G internet. And so all of these on-course customers went from betting with me on course and other bookies to going online. And so we thought, well, we have to go down the path of launching an online betting business. And we saw the success of individuals in the UK, William Hill, Victor Chandler, Betfred, and thought, well, our family has been well known. They've been in the industry for over 100 years. My mum was well known, my grandfather, my dad, and why not leverage that? And Paddy Power came out to buy Sportsbet, and they did some some market research, and we had very high awareness. And thought, well, why not brand it using that brand awareness and do it as an individual? And really, that was before the period of social media and digital marketing, which actually played into the hands of, if you look at the 50 most followed entities on, like, let's say Twitter, they're not companies. They're individuals that people follow, and so I think we're ahead of our time in that area. And then that was really successful for us. Our cost per acquisition was really low, from sort of 2009 to when we sold to William Hill in 2013. We were acquiring customers at a very low cost per acquisition, and that was a big advantage for our business. And it was. It seems like a no-brainer now, but it wasn't a no-brainer then. But we thought that was probably, based on the UK experience, the right thing to do.
Right. And are there also kind of risks by going down that path? So, for example, the brand is very tied to you personally, right? And if something happens with you, you have to take a step back from the business, or say that you end up in some controversy or something like that. Usually, businesses would have the power to rebrand and kind of start fresh to if they make a mistake, for example. But in your case, the brand is very tied to you personally. Is that also a risk?
Yeah, I think it is. You see that businesses that have gone down the path, Better is launching in the US at the moment. You had Barstool with Dave Portnoy. They obviously are going down that path because there is. It works, it works in terms of lower cost per acquisition, but you are tying yourself into an individual for the good or the bad. Richard Branson's probably an example in another industry. Gambling is highly regulated and probably got a higher bar or higher set of standards you have to keep yourself to. And I think it's the shadow of the strength. If you've got to be prepared from a personal point of view to take the backlash that comes with facing a betting business and all of the regulatory stuff that comes with it. But I think it's easier for people to identify, well, I bet with Dave Portnoy's brand, or I bet with this individual, and I see what they stand for, and I either like them or dislike them. It's far more polarizing, I think, having an individual fronting your brand. But I think from what I've seen, it's actually the quickest way to get to a certain market share. You're never going to get it having a more vanilla or mainstream brand. You're going to get a bigger market share, I think, over time. But to get quickly traction and to get a business off the ground, it's if you've got the right individual that's be able to get capture some people's attention and stuff, it works really well.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Tom, on that note as well. When you launch your business as a personal brand, and you kind of infuse your own personality into the brand and in the marketing as well, what is most important? Is it to create an image that people can relate to, that they like and that they support, or is it more important to be seen by as many people as possible, aka is all PR good PR?
I think short term, trying to get off the ground, you just have to be noticed. You don't have to be liked. You just have to have an opinion. And it's sort of like that water cooler moment. You need where people actually, can you believe that they've done this, or have you seen this? And if you can create that, well, if they're talking about you, then you're going to get the business to have some traction. And I don't know. There's some famous quote from someone is that person's living rent-free in your mind. You need to create those type of those type of moments, and you don't need to be liked. But I think if you want to have a more mature brand and to take up, be the scale dominant player in a market, well, then you need to have a more everyone can identify, everyone can use. But I think for quick traction, having polarization and people not necessarily like you, it can work very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at the major influencers in this world. Say Jake Paul, you mentioned Better here earlier. I don't think Jake Paul necessarily is that well liked by most people who follow him, so to say. But maybe he is. I'm just kind of guessing here, but he's certainly a very polarizing figure and not shy to controversy, and that's the type of content people want to see at the end of the day. And I'm a big fan of the UFC. So in MMA, the most popular fighters are often the ones who are most controversial, like Conor McGregor, good example here, of course. Nick Diaz was fighting last weekend. And so, and in our industry as well, you mentioned David Portnoy as well, very polarizing figure, but people love to follow him, right? Yeah. And so it seems to me that it is that polarizing image and big opinions and kind of the entertainment factor that people are looking for, especially in our business, which is obviously entertainment led.
Yeah, correct. It's a journey. I guess it's that polarization and creating that noise, and then if you want to keep that brand long term, is then that journey to make it more mainstream. And when you mentioned those fighters, I thought of Muhammad Ali. Like, he was so polarizing and
Yes.
at the beginning of his career, and then became a very like more mainstream type view and loved character. That's a very hard transition, you know, and not that was for a particular brand, but an individual. I think you have to go through a few. It's hard to start out. If he hadn't yelled out, "I'm the greatest," and sort of been such an outgoing person and had all of the drama about with the Vietnam War and all this sort of stuff, he may not have had that unbelievable brand awareness as compared to other heavyweight champions of the world. And then that brand changed over time, you know, and I think if you want to be, I know that's a very different to to Muhammad Ali to someone that's a brand ambassador for a gambling company or whatever. But if you want to be the winner in the market, I don't think you can be polarizing to the extent that when you launch. You know, it needs to be a mainstream appeal.
Yeah, interesting to hear. I mean, and then there are other examples as well of these kind of like personal brands that doesn't work out very well. Say, again, going back to the UFC, before Conor McGregor, the big kind of star that outshined the organization was the first female fighter, who was Ronda Rousey. She was huge when UFC launched the women's division at first, and she was a world star. Kind of everyone knew who she was and so on. Now, today, not that many people are aware of Ronda Rousey anymore, because what happened was she was very polarizing. She was very aggressive towards her opponents, and when she had her first loss, it was kind of devastating to her brand. On the other hand, Conor McGregor, he had losses, but he was still able to kind of carry that starshine forward, you know. And so again, just going back to this, that it is possible to create this personal brand, but it can also go the other way, right?
Yeah, well, I guess, and going back to like the Muhammad Ali example, you've got to actually follow through, and he was the greatest fighter of all time, wasn't he? And I guess it's the same with, you've got to keep. You can be polarizing or you can be noticed or whatever, but you've got to actually back up what you're saying if you want to be long-term winner or long-term be the. And I guess that's the same in business. If you can go out and make headlines by being polarizing or saying something or having completely different sort of marketing campaign, but you have to back it up. If you don't have the best customer experience and you don't have the best product offering and you don't keep reinventing the way you're marketing and making it interesting, well, then you're just that thing that was exciting for that little bit of time. And yeah, it's constantly evolving, and I guess that's incredible for someone that's been a successful person heading brands. Like someone like Richard Branson has been successful now over many decades, many different industries, using that Virgin brand and reinventing of what that Virgin brand stands for. There's people that have done it successfully. It's just a tough task.
And it's also like a guy like Richard Branson, for example, because of his successes and because of his kind of grit and determination throughout the years and building this image of being the guy who, always gets ahead, works hard and visualizes things into reality, his words carry weight as well. And so on the influencers around the world, there are a lot of influencers who have a massive following, like millions and millions of followers, but it's not that many influencers who actually move people in a certain direction, because many generic influencers, they maybe haven't really done anything else than just being an influencer or creating a large following. And even though they have a large following, they just don't move the needle, right? And that's the strength of a guy like Richard Branson, or yourself for that matter, who can back up what they talk about, right?
The interesting thing that I've seen that hasn't worked well in the gambling industry is when a company has got a brand ambassador or an influencer on, and they don't live and breathe and be part of that brand long term. They're just there to promote it quickly. Well, if it doesn't ring true, it doesn't work. And I guess the thing that I feel with Richard Branson is that even though he might be supporting very many different businesses with that brand. When I interact with the Virgin brand, even though they're different companies, there might be different ownership structures, and I don't know how his brand ambassador deals work, but they have a Virgin feel. It feels like it's young, it's a bit edgy, it's funny, it's not taking itself too seriously. That rings true to me, and that has got to be whoever you've got as fronting or influencing, or whether it's their own brand, it's got to be on brand. It's funny when you asked about the suits to begin with. I know with TomWaterhouse.com, it didn't have it. Maybe it wasn't the best thing to be in a suit, or maybe it wasn't the best thing to be on this or do that. But the one thing we always stuck to is it just had to be me. It might be boring what I am, but if I'm going to be the face or whatever, it just has to be consistent with the way that I act and interact, because as the minute you don't act sort of true to that brand, it sort of just doesn't work. And I think that's key. I think I think those businesses that do have brand ambassadors or influencers for them in the US gambling market, it has to be true to the brand and follow through over a long period of time, that person lives and breathes the business. And the business, if it's funny or if it's serious or if it's edgy or whatever it is, that flows through to every point of the customer interaction, whether it's call centers to the look and feel of the website, to the customer service and live chat on the website. It's got to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. People see through like people who are not authentic very quickly. I mean, it's like when you meet someone out on the street, you get to know a new person. The first thing that you are looking for is to kind of understand who the person really is in order to find a connection with that person. I think like someone like Drake, for example, and the partnership with stake.com is probably the best brand activation of the gambling industry in recent years, I would say, just for this reason, because he's adopting that personality, right? He's adopting that lifestyle as a gambler and what can happen if you bet big and kind of go big or go home type of thing. And he lives and breathes that, at least through his social media efforts. And then you can say, I mean, it's controversial, of course. You can say responsible gambling, so on and so forth. But you can't deny that it's a successful brand activation for Stake.
Yeah, I agree. If people are living a breathe that you can't help, especially in today's day and age where you're following people all the time, you just want people that are true. I know my wife follows on Instagram this lady that doesn't wear makeup, and she shows all her pimples and talks about how she's eaten too much, and she just is very raw. Yeah. But my wife loves that because it's natural. She's not all glam and that's interesting, It's it's because you feel like you're getting to know that person and understand them, and that's the same with an influencer brand person for your betting business. You want to be betting with your bookie, the person that you want to know what you're drawn to them. And I think that if someone can do that and be true to it and morph into being more mainstream over time, it's very hard for a vanilla brand to compete, because you've got so many different other channels that they can't compete on. You're never going to get a vanilla brand. And I think actually Flutter, parent company, through their funny advertising with Paddy Power and Sportsbet, have actually done it the best of those mainstream brands. But they've taken, at least in the UK, that Paddy Power individual, like Irish larrikin funny thing. I've been so impressed with how they've been able to put that across other brands. But it's a harder task as a mainstream company than an individual, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, and maybe also especially for gambling industry companies or operators, because the gambling industry is at the end of the day seen as very polarizing industry from the general public, and it maybe doesn't have the best reputation, and so it's difficult maybe to find individuals who really can kind of carry the brand for them, and who wants to kind of carry the industry's logo forward, and who wants to adopt that brand and personality that is maybe not so difficult in other industries. Say, in esports, for example, if you work in esports, you are very likely to be a fan yourself, so to say, of esports, and it will be easier to kind of create those images of personalities who want to carry the brand forward. But in our industry, it's perhaps a bit more difficult to find that connection between real human beings and the brand within the gambling industry. Do you find that as well, or am I?
Well, I think you're right.
Generalizing.
I think you're right. Is that you've got to be all in, and you've got to be very accepting that take the good with the bad. You know, if you're going to be the face of a gambling company, as you say, not everyone's going to think you're doing the most amazing thing in the world. You're not saving homeless children or people that need food, or so. You're not doing some great thing compared to other industries in a sense. And you've got to be able to say, well, look, I'm happy with that, and I'm happy to be the face, and I love this industry, and I love the thrill of it, and go, well, and the positives of being the face of this outweigh the negatives of whatever social backlash there is. And
and so to kind of tie it together a bit, I think Tom, in your case, if I were to analyze your brand and so on, I would say like why it makes sense for you to use your own brand and to kind of build on that in your organization is because you have the background that you have, right? Like you come from a long line of family of bookmakers. You were at the racing track since an early age, and you've lived and you breathed this industry your entire life. And so the connection between you, your hobbies, your interests, who you are as a person, and your business is very strong. And people obviously will trust that, so to say, or they will see that it's authentic. Right? I think that's why it works.
I think so. I thought when I was CEO of William Hill Australia's business is that if I was even in the best, 1% of CEOs, there's still thousands of CEOs, and I've been so lucky to have come from the background that I have and had the heritage and also the learnings from the family. And there's not many people in this industry or in many industries who've got such a long background, and you've got to play to your strengths, and having a brand, whether it's a personal brand, family brand, and building on that knowledge and building on that brand. I was lucky to come from that background, so why not embrace it and build on it. And I guess there's a level of authenticity in that the family name and has been known for a long period of time, but also for me, I just stick to the one industry that I've grown up in and know, and so it seems natural to use my brand and to use the family brand, because that's our one industry that we've sort of been in for 100 plus years.
Yeah, and as a final thing, we have a saying in our company. We keep repeating this especially to our commercial team, to our sales team. It's what makes the best salesperson? Like how do you sell the most optimal? Like how do you deliver the best pitch? And in the 90s, it used to be this ABC tactic, which is always be closing. It's kind of like Wolf of Wall Street type, like you snag them down until they say yes, and then you move on to the next client, and you never hear from the client that you close again. But in today's world, where we are so connected all the time, your personal reputation becomes so much more important. And so really and truly, the best salespeople in 2022 are those who are just genuinely good people. And so we always say to our team that you want to produce a lot of sales, just be yourself, like be your authentic self. Unless you are a serial killer, then don't be yourself. Okay, but then you should work somewhere else.
It's right. It's amazing the more that you can try and do good, whether it's in your relationships or in terms of trying to help other people in business. It's amazing that especially as time goes on, it becomes like a snowball. Do you know what I mean? And yes. The reverse, that if you act poorly and do poorly, it goes in the opposite direction of a snowball. And I think you're right, is stick true and act in a way that you want to be people to act to you and that having where people know you and understand you and have seen you operate in a certain way, it builds on itself, doesn't it? I think that's right. The best way to have success in sales or in building a business or whatever is to consistently act in a way that would attract people to to interact with you. So
absolutely, always be yourself, unless you're a serial killer. Someday that will be quoted under my name. So, so Tom, just to switch topic here. Like, I mean, obviously, you've had a fantastic career. You're still at a fairly young age. You have a lot ahead of you, and you accomplished a lot already. What would you attribute your success to? Is it grit? Is it being smart? Is it having the right network? Or is it luck?
I think a lot to begin with was luck. In that, obviously lucky that came from the background and family that I came to, and then luck that I went to the races at this particular, just when I'm beginning of university, because I could have easily, if I'd started off in the finance industry and finished uni and then gone to the races, well, I would have already been down another path. And then I think success breeds success, and I had luck using the blueprint of my dad and my grandfather. The first, I think, 19 meetings I worked as a bookie, I won. So it gave me huge confidence that I could be successful at it. And there's nothing like confidence. You know, I had my dad who believed that I could do it, and not many people get a chance to be a bookie at 19 or 20 and win or lose lots of money and actually be thrown in the deep end. So I had confidence from him that he thought that I was able to do it. And if your dad thinks you're able to do it, you go, well, if he thinks I can, then of course I can. And then I was lucky that I won those first sort of 19 meetings, and that gave me huge confidence to think that I could do it. And once you have a little bit, I always say when people go into business, once they have a little bit of revenue going through their hands, they can basically do anything, because once that money's going through, they can pivot and try different things. And it's a little bit like that. Once you start, if you have a little bit of success, you just don't want to stop, because it's such a great feeling of having success. And it doesn't, that's not to say, there's been so many times where things have been going unbelievably well and then have been going unbelievably poorly. And so it's not all like this. It's a roller coaster of success and not success and failures. But once you're in the game, it's so much fun. You know, you want to play the game and you want to pivot and you want to find new opportunities and new things to do. But I think definitely having the background that I had, which was luck, obviously being born into a family that had such a rich heritage in both sides of racing and betting, and luck also of having some success to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what in your opinion is are there any like traits that you see when you speak to young entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses? Obviously you have your VC firm, so you take a lot of meetings with potential investment opportunities. Are there any traits that you look for in entrepreneurs? We talked about this before, and I've early on in my own kind of entrepreneurial experience, and something I realized for myself is that I'm like, it's really important as an entrepreneur to be a bit delusional, because if you realize the task that you have ahead of yourself when you start a business, most people probably wouldn't start that business. So a hint of delusion is probably a good ingredient. But when you speak to entrepreneurs, what are things that you look for?
I think it's self-starters, you know, people that are happy to basically, they're not looking for today, like what can I be paid right now? How do I make this amount of money right now? I just want to be relentless to try and grow and to do stuff, and that aren't waiting for, well, you need to do X, Y, Z. It's well, actually, I'm going to try and do these 20 things, and I just, like a bull at a gate, non-stop of executing. And if they've got a vision and belief, like you said, in terms of belief that they can do it, whether it's founded or not, is that being relentless to go after it. And the people that have I've been most impressed with have said to me, oh, look, these are all the things that I can I want to do, and I'm not looking for anything from you, but I'd love you to be involved, but I'm going to do these 10 or 20 things, and they just get on and do it. And you're like, wow, this person's a force, because a lot of people have ideas and a lot of people can talk the talk, but there's a big difference between having ideas, talking the talk, and actually executing. And I guess then another level on of those people that talk the talk, have ideas and execute, is the people that are really successful, I think, are the people that execute, but then have the vision and the storytelling and the personality that want to bring people and can bring people on the journey. Because you need an army of people that you're going to bring along for them to be successful. So you need a whole group of people that you work with to make a success of things. And you need where they're willing to go down your path and fight that battle that you want to fight. And those type of people that are relentless, but also can bring other people to on that journey, they're very hard.
It's a great point, I think, Tom, because I think maybe what is overlooked sometimes as a young entrepreneur is say that you have the smarts to come up with a really good idea, and you have the grit and determination to actually put in the hours and the sacrifice that is needed to get the ball rolling. But then the next issue is, as you point out, that you have to build a team around yourself as well. And perhaps in the beginning, when you found a company, you don't have the financial strength to attract the best talent on the market. And so how do you attract that talent still, even though a really good candidate will get a much better offer from a established organization, like an established competitor that has a much more secure kind of offers a better, more sustainable livelihood for that employee. Like, you have to be really good at convincing people that your idea is worth taking a risk for, right? That's a huge hurdle for any startup.
Correct. And I guess there's belief in that if someone respects you and goes, well, that person's switched on, I believe what the vision he's outlining, and he's committing his life to make it a success, it's quite compelling, because you're like, well, actually, the person switched on. What they're outlining seems plausible and looks like it's a great opportunity, and they're giving up everything in their time and their effort to make it a success. You're like, actually, I want to be with that person, because they've got so much like drive and ambition, and they're going after it. But it's obviously much harder if you're not willing to commit yourself, and it's hard to get talent. And I guess the key thing of starting a business, you need to find someone that can really complement you, and that is the right person to take that business along the journey. You need someone that complements the skill sets that you don't have.
Absolutely, it's a good way of putting it. And Tom, I mean, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been the CEO of a large organization, you're an investor now, obviously, and so you kind of have experienced a lot of different positions and responsibilities in your career. What would you say is the difference between, say, being an entrepreneur and being a CEO of a large organization? What differs between the skill sets that you need to have and also an investor, say? Like you must have adopted a lot of these skills along the way in order to be successful.
Yeah, it's interesting in that. So I've gone from family business to an on-course bookie down in Melbourne, and having to go away from that sort of partnership with my grandfather, which was just such a great time of my life. But we fought like cat and dog. I can't think of anyone that I've argued with except for my grandfather. We would, every day going home in the car, he would just absolutely give it to me and tell me, you're an imbecile, you're an idiot, you've got no idea what you're doing, which was amazing, because I had this person, my grandfather was in his 80s, who'd been the biggest bookie in the world and had this amount of experience, just telling me from a raw perspective what I was doing wrong. And he was actually right about nearly everything. But having that sort of guidance and hard back at me made me have thick skin, like toughened me up. And going from that family business environment with my aunt, my dad, and my grandfather, to then moving down to Melbourne and not having my grandfather by my side, to being an on-course bookie, to then tomwaterhouse.com, which was an online startup, to then selling to William Hill and being the CEO of William Hill Australia, which had, as you mentioned, 500 people and $2.5 billion turnover, as a much bigger organisation across multiple countries, to have to manage that, to then going back into startup and then launching Waterhouse VC as an investment fund. They all have amazing bits about them that you go, gosh, I wish I was in that bit because it had this. And then, as we talked about before, they had shadows of their strengths. It's there's family business is got such great appeal to it because you're in the trenches with people you love, people you trust, but it's also a lot more raw in a certain sense because I could never speak to someone the way that my grandfather and I interacted, but that was amazing that we could interact in that way. And you also are living and breathing your work when you're at home, so that family interaction time is different. But you probably never have that level of trust and intimacy with anyone else or that love that you have with your family. And then in a startup business, you're flying by the seat of your pants because you don't know all the different roles of whether it's marketing or customer service or how to set up all the different accounts you need to set up and to hire, and you sort of have to do a bit of everything. And that was a great learning experience coming into to run William Hill's business in Australia, because I had to have understood each function within a corporate bookmaking business. And then being a corporate CEO and having 500 people in that business is that you've got to be successful in a business of scale, and obviously much bigger, is that you've got to basically display a vision that people are going to jump on board with, and also not only get large teams to believe in you, but it's a non-stop people interaction. You've got to really put the time in and care for that team, and that's a very tough job. I remember that role, be in the office before 7 and have catch-ups for 2 hours before even the day starts, of just spending time with the people, understanding what drives them, and trying to ensure that the vision that you have as CEO is the same vision that they're sharing, and that vision cascades down to all the different departments within the business. And that is a very tough job, and not to say that I succeeded in that at all. It's a tough task. And then you've got to take that vision that you have as the company in that country and make sure that that's the same aligned vision with the mothership, with the corporate entity, which has so many other competing interests with its different global divisions. And so I think it's about having a vision that people buy into downstream and also upstream. And that's a very complicated, you go to be running like a big ship, and then back in startup mode, you're like a speedboat again. And that is the thing that I've really enjoyed about the investing side of things, is seeing that people and businesses that can do those skill sets across startups, small businesses, family businesses, large corporates, and who are doing those things well. And then there's a big difference between who do them great, who are doing them poorly. And I don't think I was a major success in any of those. It was just interesting to see how different they are. Family businesses, startup business, sole trader businesses, corporate entities, listed businesses. They're different.
So Tom, sometimes I look at my own network and of successful people that I know or that I've seen and so forth, and it seems to be the people who become CEOs of big organizations seem to have two different journeys. Either the CEOs, they kind of become career CEOs and they would move on from one CEO position to another and so on. And I don't know, I think the psychological explanation for that is that some people are just naturally very orderly.
No.
And so they prefer to keep things organized. And so they naturally fall into this kind of CEO position which is a lot about kind of organizing and keeping the ship together, so to say. And then others, CEOs, they kind of had this journey where they perhaps start the organization, they build it to a point where they feel like it's time to move on to something else. And it seems to me that that is a little bit the journey that you've had. Like you started from scratch in a way, you build up the organization, and now you have moved on to kind of become an investor. Do you think, do you feel that from your perspective that it gives you an advantage, an edge, so to say, that you've had that experience running a company, building a company, when you now work as an investor and you try to assist and to guide the companies that you work with?
Yeah, I think I am so thankful for the time that I had with William Hill, and running that business was just so interesting. But the bit that it's the bit that I find a lot more interesting now is being an investor and running Waterhouse VC, and basically using the lessons of the last 20 years from being a bookmaker to online betting business to running William Hill, and basically those lessons and finding business that display the attributes very strongly of what I think is going to lead to success. And I think it was a perfect time of my life before kids were old enough of William Hill. It's basically to be successful. And again, it's not to say that I was in some great success. I had a lot to learn as a corporate CEO, but you have to be all in. You have to be all in. You have to, for it to be, it's a huge grind. And you see these people and case studies of these great sort of football managers and sporting managers, and they live and breathe, and every person in that organization is like part of their family. And that is the level of commitment, I think, to ultimately be a great success. You need to really be all in and be guiding that ship on a vision that's shared. And even with all of that, you may not be a success, but I think it's an all-in thing, and it's a huge task to be a successful CEO of a large organization.
All right, Tom. So how important is it for startups to have an exit strategy? Because if I understand it correctly, the type of organizations you invest in are generally post-revenue, but they are still quite early in their journey. And so when you look at the potential investment opportunities, is the potential exit strategy, is that a center stone in the decision you take to invest in organizations, or can that come at a later stage?
No, I think so. We're long-term investors, and so it's less about the exit. We want to be in businesses that are revenue generating, because as we sort of touched on before, it's very easy to have a great idea and talk the talk, but if you've actually got money going through your hands and you're generating revenue, you've proven that you'll be able to get over that really hard stage of launching. And so we want to see revenue going through their hands. And for us, it's more important, can they provide a key technology that multiple operators will want? And for us, if they can build a great business, great technology across multiple operators, well, the exit or the liquidity point will come at a certain stage. But for us, we want to be long-term investors in the key technology anyway. So it's far more about right team. Have they been able to execute, getting money in the door? And do they have a technology that's good enough to be in not just one or two operators, but 10 or 20 operators?
Brilliant. And final question as well for you, Tom. Who should be interested in contacting you when it comes to potential investees? So organizations that might look for an organization, what type of organization should you be in order to be an interesting object to Tom Waterhouse VC? And also, are you looking for LPs, general partners, more investment into the fund? What are the people who should be interested in contacting you, basically?
Our main focus is finding businesses, finding great businesses that we want to invest in. And that's really, for us, it's, can the business solve pain points for the operators? So is it from things that we touched on before? Can they lower the cost per acquisition? Can they increase the value per player? Can they make the user journey much better, much slicker? Can they put a new piece of technology that the market hasn't seen? Are they doing these? Have they got this thing? Have they been able to convince someone to try the technology already? And has it got some traction? And if it has got some traction, we think it's unique and solves a problem, then it's very interesting for us. And that's sort of what we sort of stick to, and really just trying to focus on paying close attention to what the operators are doing and what are they struggling, what are the things they're looking for. And so like understanding speaking to the people from their teams, listening to all their investor calls, reading their annual reports, understanding what are the pain points of these large organizations, and who are the technology providers out there trying to solve those problems. And yeah, for us, it's much more, we want to spend 99.9% of our time thinking about those type of businesses and meeting those businesses rather than going and raising money or finding investors. Where we sort of focus on if we can do great deals and hopefully get good returns, the rest of it takes care of itself.
Brilliant, Tom. And final question from my side as well. What's the purpose of all of this, Tom? Like you're 40 years old. You've had great success in your career. You could retire tomorrow if you wanted, but you keep going. What's the end goal? What's the purpose with your hard work?
Yeah, I sort of I think of one of those self-help books or whatever you sort of read, and they go, put a number in your mind, and if you think about that number, you'll get to that number. And then, like, all of this sort of from a financial point of view, I don't think of it, well, I need to get to this, or I've got to this, and I can retire. To me, the most fun game there is business, and I think I would pay unlimited to be able to meet, when I say unlimited, I'd be so interested, and it would be worth a fortune to meet the likes of Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger or Rupert Murdoch or George Soros or any of these people that are in their later years in life, but they're still at the forefront. And whether you like what they've done in business or you don't like, or you like, they're just interesting because they're doing stuff and they continue to do stuff and keep pushing the boundaries and are so on top of things. It's amazing that they're just so with it and on top of everything. And I sort of go, well, throughout my life, I want to be doing stuff, and I don't want to ever retire, and I want to be in the game. I like business better than golf or better than tennis or betting. I want to be in that game, and I want to be sort of doing stuff till I can't do it anymore. And I think if you're in the game, for me, you're very interesting. And it's just because someone has some money or whatever, it's if they're not doing anything, they're not as interesting to be around. Hopefully, when I'm much older, people go, I still want to. My kids or grandkids want to talk about business and do stuff, because I love that game. And so for me, I don't want to ever retire. I just want to keep trying to evolve and try different things, but stick to the core area that I have expertise in and that I've been lucky to grow up in, but keep going from on-course bookie to startup to running William Hill to having a tipping business, odds aggregator business, to now complete focus on running this VC business and being an investor. Hopefully it keeps evolving.
I love that.
And keep doing.
It's fantastic. It's the passion.
Yeah. And,
it's the passion.
Correct. Yeah. Who wants to? Some people want to retire, and I completely get it. But my grandfather was going to the office 7 days a week until he was in his mid-90s, and my mum and dad, who are nowhere near retirement, but they still get up at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning and working every day, and they're doing way more than what I'm doing, and it's so interesting, like hearing like what they're up to and their latest things and the battles and it's great. It's fun.
Absolutely. It's like the late Steve Jobs used to say, it's the journey that is the reward, not the end goal, basically.
Correct.
Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. It's a huge honor for me to be able to spend this time with you. And I want to thank you so much for today, and hope to have you back here soon.
Thanks, Pierre. Thank you.